In the previous two lessons, you jumped right into the cut page and delivered a finished teaser without having to look under the hood of Resolve to establish the settings that made it all work. In this lesson, we'll take a look at the essential project settings and preferences you'll need to configure whenever you set up a new project or use Resolve on a new workstation. If Resolve is closed, launch the app to get to the Project Manager. If Resolve is already open, click the Home button in the lower right of the UI or press Shift-1. At the bottom of the window, click the New Project button. Resolve will prompt you for a project name. Name the project Nelson Teaser 2, then click Create. The new project opens to the last page you were working on, in our case, the cut page. Open the Edit page by clicking the icon. Before we go any further, it's always a good idea to reset the UI from the previous lesson. From the Workspace menu, choose Reset UI Layout. Resolve uses default values for settings such as frame rate and resolution whenever you create a new project. These values can be customized in the aptly named Project Settings window. There are three ways to access it. Click on the gear in the lower right of the UI, choose Project Settings from the File menu, or press Shift-9. The timeline format settings are listed at the top of the window under the Master Settings category. Here you can see that our project is currently configured for 1920 by 1080 HD with a timeline frame rate of 24 frames per second. If you know your media's resolution and frame rate, you can override the default settings by choosing a different resolution and frame rate from these drop-downs. It's important to remember to set these correctly before importing any media, though you're not stuck with them if you need to create other timelines with different resolutions and frame rates. Remember, these are default settings, which means they will be the ones applied whenever you create a new empty timeline. I should point out that if you're working with the free version of Resolve, UHD is the highest resolution that's supported. The footage I provided was shot in both UHD and HD at a frame rate of 24 frames per second. So we'll use the default HD settings for the project we'll be working on. If you do happen to make changes to any of these master settings, you'll need to save them in order for them to take effect. But because we didn't make any changes to our settings, the only option is Cancel. Just make sure your timeline settings look like mine before leaving this window. Now go to the DaVinci Resolve menu and choose Preferences or press Command-, The Preferences window controls the overall environment of your DaVinci workstation, allowing you to choose what hardware to use with Resolve and what interface settings you prefer. There are two buttons at the top of the window: System and User. System settings are settings that relate to your computer and connected hardware, and user settings allow you to customize Resolve's interface in the way you prefer to work. These settings are not saved with the project you're working on, but saved for your specific workstation. Once you set these up, you rarely need to change them unless you happen to be working on a different workstation connected to different hardware devices. The first and most important place to start is the Media Storage category. In this area, you add drives, often called scratch disks, that are used for storing cached or rendered files, still frames, and optimized media for improving playback performance. The default storage location appears at the top of this window, which on my system is currently set for my local movies folder. It's always a good idea to set your scratch disk to the largest, fastest drive possible. For example, an SSD or RAID. To add a drive, click Add, then navigate to your preferred drive. Select the drive, then click Open. That drive now appears in the list. Place a check next to it to tell Resolve to use that drive as your scratch disk. For this tutorial, you can use your local drive. Just be aware that if you don't have a lot of hard drive space to begin with, your boot drive can fill up very quickly once you start rendering clips in the Fusion or Color pages. I'll remove that drive. Let's take a quick look at some other system settings. If you plan on using video and audio interfaces with Resolve, you would configure them in the Video and Audio I/O section. These would typically include Blackmagic Design I/O boxes connected to your computer and audio interface equipment. If you have a control panel you want to use for grading, you would set that up in the Control Panel section. Switching over to the User tab of the Preferences, you are presented with a host of customization options to make Resolve work in a way that's most intuitive for you. Most of these settings boil down to personal preference, so I won't go through them line by line, but I will point out a few that you may find useful. One such setting is Reload Last Working Project on Startup. This is pretty self-explanatory, but tends to be pretty convenient if your workflow doesn't involve working on several projects at the same time. The next one is Show Focus Indicators in the user interface. This one is pretty important because Resolve will present an orange bar over the top of the interface panel that is currently in focus. This is important because you might be attempting to use a keyboard command that only works in a specific panel. In the Project Save and Load section, there's an option to have all the timelines within a project load automatically when you open the project. This option can be very convenient at times, but for large and complex projects, it can lead to increased load times. For this tutorial, we'll leave that unchecked. However, let's make sure to check the box next to Live Save. This feature essentially tells Resolve to save after every action you perform, which can be a real lifesaver in the event that Resolve quits unexpectedly. You can also set Resolve up to automatically back up your timelines and/or projects at the time intervals you set. These backups provide an added level of security because you'll be able to revert to an earlier version of a timeline or project if you need to. Note the current location of your backups, which can be changed by clicking the Browse button. In the Editing section, there are several options for adjusting various default settings governing new timelines, smart bins, and general settings. For any new timelines you create in your projects, these are the settings that will be applied. So currently, if you create a new timeline, it will have one video track, one audio track, and the audio configuration will be set to stereo. In the Automatic Smart Bin section, there are options for Resolve to automatically create bins based on specified rules and other metadata. I like enabling smart bins for timelines because anytime I create a new timeline, it will automatically appear in this smart bin. There's also some general settings related to content and pre-roll duration, etc. I just leave these at their defaults unless I have reason to change them. When you're finished, click Save. Keep in mind that changing some options and preferences will require you to restart DaVinci Resolve. As you get faster in DaVinci Resolve, you rely less on mouse clicks and more on keyboard shortcuts. From the DaVinci Resolve menu, choose Keyboard Customization. Here, you can set or adjust keyboard shortcuts for your most commonly used commands. If you're coming from another editing system and want Resolve to mimic a particular keyboard command set, just choose the NLE from this menu. We'll leave this set for DaVinci Resolve. To see what command a particular key is mapped to, click any combination of modifier and other keys on the virtual keyboard. With no modifier selected, all the keys that appear in light gray have commands assigned to them. Select a key, and the command it's assigned to appears in the commands list. For example, clicking the A key shows that this key is assigned to the Normal Edit Mode tool. But if I click the Control modifier, there are no commands assigned to that key. You can either search for a specific command or for a particular shortcut. Let's make a custom shortcut. In the commands list, select All Commands at the top of the panel. In the search field, enter UI. This brings up all the commands with the word UI in them. Since we'll be resetting the UI a lot throughout this tutorial, it would be good to assign a keyboard shortcut to it. If I select the U key with no modifier, we can see that it's assigned to the edit point type. If I click the Control key modifier, you can see that the U key is assignable. Click the box to the right of the command you want to assign, then press the key combination. Type Control U on the keyboard. In the commands list, that shortcut appears next to Application, which means it will work in every page across the app. Click Save and give your command set a name. I'll call mine Steve for convenience, then click OK. Then close the window. To test the command, I'll adjust the size of the Media Pool panel, then press Control U. Very cool. In the next lesson, we'll import and organize the media we plan on using for this project.